development is supporting the development of inclusion towards meeting the needs of disabled children and those with learning difficulties.
Whether you're in a mainstream school or a special school, inclusion is on the agenda.
When disabled pupils are included, what differences will there be? And how will you, the teacher, cope?
Each time it gets to not now Bernard, Laura's going to have a turn. Can you press it, Laura, and show us?
Not now, Bernard.
Right, let's see if we can read this together after 3. 1, 2, 3. Hello, Mum, said Bernard. Laura's turn.
Not now, Bernard.
Said his mother.
I find that most people are actually committed to the idea of being inclusive as a matter of principle. But I think teachers find it difficult to understand, well, what do you mean by inclusion? What will it look like? And I think the confusion over the concept itself acts as a barrier.
Not everybody initially was 100% keen on it happening, and it was very problematic at first. And you needed to spend a lot of time talking with people and talking through problems and creating time for people to talk to each other.
If we could come to some consensus that, yeah, we want to support it, then we can just move on and talk about the logistics and the cost involved and how we actually put it in place.
I think it's a good idea if it works, but we won't know if it works until it's in place. And the politicians have decided it's a good idea now, but they must have thought it was a good idea to have special schools before. In 10 years' time, they'll probably think something different again. Yeah. We're just being guinea pigs, really.
I think that if a school wants to move towards being more inclusive, have a debate, set aside a resource, celebrate the inclusive practices they already have, see how they can become more inclusive, and that's bound to lead to more success for more kids, and then ask themselves the question, why not? Not why, but why not? Why not welcome everybody within our local community into our local school?
It's worth the risk, frankly. It's down really to what you believe in, isn't it, in the end? It's worth taking the chance. I mean, for me, the inclusion argument is one. It's not a question of should we or what if. For me and for the majority of the staff in school, it's a question of how. And if you're over that philosophical hurdle, then you can talk about practicalities and you can talk about the practical ways you can deploy the resources to help the youngsters in the school.
I like to get into my classroom, close the door, and just get on with it.
I think there is a tradition in our profession which in itself is a barrier, and that is the tradition of teachers working alone, with the door closed, solving their problems, dealing with the situation that they face in their class.
Whereas here, we're meeting continuously during the day, we're talking continuously during the day, we're looking at how each other's teaching, we're looking at how the children are responding to various teachers, and so a lot of the information transfer is happening all the time.
And I notice in schools that make progress, there is a deliberate management strategy to encourage people to work together, to be in one another's classrooms and to see one another working.
One of the things that is very crucial to the organisation and management of Cleves is working in teams.
All right, so we need tape. You can help me with this. There are specific trained teachers who work in this unit who support the early years children and the special needs children, and there's LSAs. And so we all have our own expertises and we're able to fit in within this environment, either working with individual children or working with groups or supporting whole class times. So it's a really good mix for the staff as well and good role models for us too. So there's your pop-up, nice and strong.
And those teams are led by team leaders, so there's quite a delegated management structure. Those team leaders have responsibility for rotas of staff, monitoring and evaluation of the curriculum.
It is quite possible to be very flexible within a literacy hour or within a numeracy session, still to differentiate all the activities, to have the flexibility for children to work across year groups and to move around more flexibly.
Hey, what's it going to start with?
We've got tremendous support from the county services. We have the county service for sensory impaired children who are working very hard on our behalf in and out of the school.
What are the 3 states of matter? Kerry? I think that's the main difference in teaching the pupils with special needs. You've got to plan well in advance. For my Year 11 group, for example, I've got 2 boys in there that have visual impairment. Carl, who's blind.
Carl! It's, the particles are quite close together, but they're vibrating fast enough to be able to go slightly apart, but the bonds are still holding them so they can flow, but they're still held together.
Okay.
It's been really good because they provided me with a lot of the equipment that's helped me to have the work prepared, and the support staff as well, who've been able to support me and help me to carry out all the tasks that have been asked. And I think that's helped a great deal, because otherwise you just would have been totally stuck, because a lot of the teaching methods are practical, like with overhead projectors and whiteboards and that.
At least 3-4 weeks in advance we plan to look at what curriculum areas we're going to be covering.
Take your test tube full of the wax, put it in there and put in a thermometer. Okay.
Give the support assistants the worksheets that need to be brailled or enlarged, and think of different ways around doing experiments that the average pupil can access. Try and make sure that the pupils that are visually impaired, for example, can have enlargements of models that we're using or experiments that we're doing, making sure Carl could use a talking thermometer, for example.
I suppose it would have been if I thought about it.
Just bringing in other equipment that makes them access the experiments that all the others can.
58, exactly.
Our learning support staff are involved in all of our teacher training, so they're fully aware of the current thinking that goes on behind our teaching and learning.
The level of disruption that disabled children might bring, you know, the noise and the challenging behaviour. I like order in my classroom.
In much of the discussion about inclusion talks about the differences between children, but there's also the question of the differences between adults. And what I notice is in schools that make progress, people learn how to collaborate, and that doesn't mean just being friendlier to one another, it includes that, but it actually includes the capacity to disagree and dispute, and to use argument as a source of creativity.
If you've got children with special needs, disabled children or whatever, in a classroom, in a school, and it seems that all the policies are moving towards inclusion, which is great, and we all agree with that in principle. What it seems to me logically is that shouldn't the whole school reflect some sort of inclusion policy?
People can get together and can not only plan, but can talk about any problems that they've encountered, and that we can actually make notes of those and keep a record, and that enables us to make sure that we are improving continually and that we're addressing issues not only for pupils but for the adults who are working in school as well.
I also have learning support assistants in the classroom with me now, because the government have introduced us having learning support assistants for reception classes.
I think the idea of learning support assistants is a really good idea. You know, having more adults around the classroom is a way of creating a more responsive learning environment.
There obviously was this mismatch between what we thought was happening and what the parents thought was happening. We introduced the classroom assistants and they all had an opportunity to show what kind of work they were doing with the children in school.
Is Wasim your friend?
How that role as a support assistant was to help the children to learn.
Go to spell check and I'll come and help you.
There was no time where they were all 12 there together, but there were 12 adults that actually worked within that classroom at one time or another.
To be honest, I really don't want other people in my classroom when I'm teaching.
Initially, teachers found the whole idea of support assistants coming into their classroom quite daunting and felt that they were on display, and would they get it right, and did they understand about special needs. I think now that the support assistants have actually become part of the school staff in a real way, they're included in staff meetings, they're there at briefing every morning, that actually they can see it as more as a partnership.
You've got about 5 layers in this particular sheet.
The practical management of inclusion depends on how support is deployed. At Rawthorpe Secondary School, Huddersfield, support teachers are assigned to subject areas rather than individuals. How does this work?
We've turned more towards supporting the curriculum rather than supporting the individual children. So we have a large team of learning support assistants, and each assistant is attached to a part of the curriculum, so that we see that they're there to learn about the curriculum, to help develop the curriculum, and see how that can be developed to meet the needs of children with learning difficulties.
You do need extra support.
because obviously you've got full classes, about 20 kids, that extra pair of eyes. You need that, to help you. You only have to turn around and somebody might be messing about, using the machine without goggles or whatever.
Do not sit on the bench.
Not only do the support assistants support in the classroom, they also have some time when they're able to support outside the classroom in terms of helping with the bureaucracy or the administration or the resourcing of the department. If there are children who've got a very specific problem with that subject area, then they would spend some time concentrating on the particular child. They see themselves primarily as a whole class resource, so they might help with the setting up of the lesson. They might spend some time with a number of children while the teacher could then concentrate on a particular group.
That teacher over there gives me help like in IT. That's all written this from the address that and written.
I'm an inclusive support worker. In this lesson they're working on a newspaper. Many pupils got computer skills that might be greater than mine, so help them with the literacy and the work. It's a very important skill in the modern world, and I think it's very important to have two teachers to work together to enable the pupils to access those important skills that they have.
My job is to make sure that we've got enough to keep all end of the spectrums working, and then if we've got ISWs in, they concentrate more on those people, and if they're not needed just for the lower end, then they can concentrate on the whole lot. They can help out whatever they want, but he or she is not solely just for the kids that they're prioritised for. If they can answer a question, if I'm on the other corner of the room, then they can, it's an extra body.
You can make a difference to 2 or 3 or 4 pupils a day, and we're all achieving something special.
Some curriculum subjects may lend themselves more easily to inclusive teaching. Different subject areas can present a variety of challenges.
Hi, I'm Thomas Wheeler, and this is Beckfoot School.
One of the curriculum areas which caused us major difficulties when we decided to admit students with physical difficulties was technology. It was difficult in that students hadn't got access to machines, either at the right height or that was safe for them to use. Myself and the head of technology spent a lot of time looking at other schools, looking through catalogues, and with the help of the school's technician actually designed this area here. Do you want to talk us through what we've got?
Right. This is a drill. It's used to put holes in materials such as wood and metal. You just bring it down, the wood would be clamped on, and you just bring it down and it'd make a hole into the wood or metal.
That's easy for Thomas to use. Most of the other machines in school have all their buttons on the floor. That wouldn't be safe for Thomas because he wouldn't be able to use his legs in an emergency situation. We've got a saw over here. Have you used a saw? Yeah, I've used it. I think it's true to say as well that Thomas, if he'd have come here 5 years ago, wouldn't have been able to do technology, wouldn't have been able to achieve the grade that he hopes to get at GCSE technology this year.
You put a bit of wood underneath the clamp here and tighten it up so that it won't move. Gradually push the wood through the saw and make it into whatever shape. This is a sander. This is for just making wood surfaces smooth on finished products really. Just works by pressing the start button, having a bit of wood on the edge, and then gradually, slowly, just easing it onto the machine, which will spin round and take some of the woods off to make it a smooth edge.
Mixed ability teaching certainly helps with inclusion because students are working alongside each other.
Somebody put their hand up and say that word. Joe? Glass. Glass. We say glass, and it's a northern way of speaking, it's a northern way of pronunciation. Glass. Right, well, hang on a minute. But there's no R in it, is there? But that's how it's pronounced in different parts of the country. we're talking about different pronunciation, aren't we? If you were watching the news, do they say us or as? Put your hands up if you think they say us. Put your hands up if you think they say as. That's more like it. Yeah, they say as. Received pronunciation.
I find if you set students, you're not including, because what you end up is you end up with the bottom set called the support stream or the remedial group, and that's not full inclusion.
Reg? All right, phonetically.
Disabled children coming in. I mean, some of them will be blind, some of them may even be deaf. I mean, I don't use sign language. What am I supposed to do?
For students who are deaf, I think inclusion means acceptance into society as it is as a whole and access to what goes on for every other kid on their street.
Maître. Excellent.
We put 4 hours worth of British Sign Language into every Year 7 tutor group's modern foreign language lessons. That means they all have, if you like, survival sign language skills, which really helps them just to get an idea that British Sign Language is a language and it's not just someone waving their arms about, and it's not just people signing every word in English word order. What happens when the lesson is delivered in French is I listen to what's going on in French and get that processed into English so I know what's being said, and then I have to sign it in BSL so that the students get the idea of what they're being asked to do. Now that doesn't help them in terms of their listening and speaking skills in French, but if they understand the concept of what they have to do and can focus that onto the written text, then I feel that access to written French is quite important for them. It's also a route into looking at the grammatical structure of English. When you start looking at yet another language, you've got English and you've got BSL. When you start looking at the grammatical structure of French, I have many opportunities to say in BSL it looks like this, in written English we write it like that, but in written French we write it a different way. And it's a chance to reinforce English grammar as well as French grammar at the same time. Because the students who are deaf need access to everything that's going on, whatever happens for that class, they always have a communicator in with them. They always have someone who signs what the teacher's saying. So they always get access to everything that's happening, messages, assemblies, tutor times. On top of that, because we need to provide for their deaf experience and their deaf culture, we have a deaf instructor who works alongside us, who works really to look at deaf students' learning rather than just their access. So how they actually learn what they need to know from the curriculum, how they become more literate in English. And we put staff into classes depending on what's happening in the class and where we perceive that need to be.
Why are we only talking about having disabled children as kids in the classroom? Why aren't we talking about having disabled members of staff? Because it just occurs to me that if you're taking kids out of special schools, then they're not getting any role models, they're not seeing adults with similar disabilities.
In my own child's school, they have a blind teacher, a French teacher, who is superb, and that he's a very good model, and they all respect him greatly.
They have an hour's worth of deaf awareness training from our deaf instructor, who talks to kids very clearly through either myself or a communicator voicing for him. He leads the lesson in sign language and we voice over, so you have like a reversal of who's teaching the lesson, which is very interesting for kids. Kids respond to it very well. And after that, they're less likely to shout "sir" at Mr Davis in the corridor when he's got their back to them. Before that, they still haven't quite worked out that he really can't hear from unless he's looking at them. And that he's very clear with them about what it's like to be deaf and experiences, and kids are very open-minded. The difficult bit was the whole issue around deafness and sign language and how that would work.
Now, what do you think might happen if a person from the group takes a fruit from the tree? What do you think?
The staff here have taken it on very well, and even people who had a few misgivings for all sorts of very good educational reasons about could we provide for these students, 2 years down the line are very positive.
Wait.
One's currently ahead of year with year 7 and will allow nobody to say that this is not the right place for deaf students. He's very, very keen that they're in his year group and that they're doing really well. Every member of staff had some training, every member of staff saw what sign language looked like. I'm personally very proud about how well the staff have taken on the idea of having deaf students and all the people that come with them in their classes, and adapting to being able to accept a very different linguistic, cultural group of children.
It's a school of 1,100 pupils. 50 of those have sensory needs, hearing impairment or a physical disability. We've got a number of teaching staff and learning support staff who have passed their Stage 1 BSL sign language course. And we extended classes to the pupils.
Within deaf culture, it's not rude to point. Can you practice that? Name. My name. Your name.
We have a tutor coming in after school to do deaf awareness courses, and I also happen to take a class during the lunch hour.
We have to make provisions. Sight access for wheelchairs, hearing aids, radio aids for deaf students. We have the support of individual education plans, statement of special educational needs, and the code of practice. And all of this should facilitate a proper programme for each student, and hopefully we can adapt it and bring it into mainstream education. Access to the curriculum must come top of the list. The benefits for students to have the opportunity to gain qualifications, to take them forward, to gain employment later is the priority.
1, 2, 3, 4. Easy, easy, easy.
However, we must recognise their needs as individuals and their development in a personal sense. Hopefully this means a good inclusive education and a full understanding and development of themselves as individuals by the end of our 5 years, able to go on to further education and the workplace.
I'm going to Bridgend College next year, where I'm going to do IT, GCSE, and I hope to upgrade my maths.
We've got standards. We did rather well in the league tables this year.
The pressure on teachers at the moment is extreme. The pressure to produce results, to reach targets, the pressure of league tables and standards. The inspections of schools by Ofsted, I think, puts a lot of pressure on teachers.
Key Stage 1, we've improved reading and writing by about 35% over the past 3 years. It's a significant improvement.
Think about when you're putting your slices of bread into the toaster. Shh! What do you do to have to make them go down? Do you... Shh! Don't tell anyone. Draw them in the set that you're thinking of.
We've got some very good GCSE results, better than we might have hoped for. And our feeling is that the results that we have are better than they might have been had we not had the children with disabilities in the school.
In the cohort of physically disabled pupils, there are a proportion of very bright pupils, and they come on remarkably well.
Yeah, that's a good start, because what they're concerned about is the relationships on your daily. Yeah.
We have children who, for example, in the past have gone to university. We have one lad presently who's about to get a degree in economics.
I then applied to Manchester University as one of many options. I got accepted onto the economics course. I came here and I studied economics for the first 3 years. I've just achieved a 2-1 and I've got a job with Goldman Sachs now, trading on this London Stock Exchange.
Inclusion? I would think it would be very expensive.
When you're starting on the journey, people want to put not matters of principle in the way of inclusion, but often matters of resource, because that's an easier and less emotive thing to put in the way.
We weren't designed to take these kind of children. It's not like a special school that was built with that purpose absolutely in mind. We've got to adapt, and it's all very well having extra assistance, but you know, the physical confines of this building were not designed with that in mind.
The wise administrator or the wise person who's trying to lead inclusion will put lots of resource for training, for preparation, for double funding at the beginning in order to get people comfortable and let them build on the successful practice of inclusion.
When the school was set up as a resource school, Stockport actually put extra funding into the school to allow us time to actually build into the school day the planning meetings. And we are actually funded for 1.5 teachers, for 1.5 of me, but we don't use the 1.5 as teachers. We use the money for the resources that are necessary, maybe to employ extra assistants if this is what is important for the children. Having seen the 4 children move up through the school, through the education, through the inclusion with the mainstream children, it is absolutely wonderful. And I now say that inclusion for all children is the way forward.
If a teacher has the right attitude, if the school has the right attitude, if the community has the right attitude, it will work. So I would certainly say to new teachers coming into the profession, don't be afraid to say, this is how I feel, this is what I'm scared of. It could be that they've gone all the way through their life without coming across children or young adults who have different needs to themselves. Don't be afraid to ask for further support or training.
The way that we're working can be reproduced anywhere in any school. Obviously, I wouldn't put down any of the resources that we've got. That's the icing on the cake, if you like. But the most important resource that we've got in the school is the human resource, and it's our staff wanting to include children in the school. And once you've got that attitude permeating through the staff team, then you can do it anywhere.
It's making sure that children are successful within the curriculum, but it's also broader than that. It's making sure that they have life experiences, that they learn to work together, to support each other, that actually education is fun, and it should be fun.
People are learning how to live with and learn from difference, and as teachers, we learn a lot from listening to the children themselves.
It's more exciting having different people in our school.
I know people at this store to help children like us.
Always listen to disabled students. Always give them the opportunity to voice their opinions, and who knows, your school might benefit from that student's advice.
It don't make any difference if they've got curly hair, if they're disabled or anything.
As my teachers used to say, nothing happens overnight.
Come in!
As my teachers used to say, nothing happens overnight.